Welcome everyone to today's webinar. The topic here is how to engage your team like a world-class leader. I am your presenter today. My name is Ilana Zivkovich. I am the CEO and founder of Work, the company that you see featured down there. We are a strategic leadership advisory firm. So this stuff gets me really excited. It's what I'm very passionate about and what my company spends a lot of time and energy doing. My background before getting into this role was in behavioral health, which is how I come to know C4 and actually know many of you on this webinar. So I've served in a variety of executive level positions in the behavioral health sector, specifically in addiction. And throughout that time, it just became very clear to me if I wanted my clients to have the best results possible, there had to be a good focus on the staff. And that's where the sort of genesis for my company was born, and certainly the topic of today's webinar. So diving right in. Almost diving in. Okay, we'll figure out how to click. So welcome. Why engagement, first of all? Why does employee engagement matter? I could definitely stand here or sit here and quote you a bunch of stats and let you know how much more money a company can make if people are engaged and customer satisfaction, all that. It's out there. I'm happy to send it to you via email. But engagement is as close to the secret sauce of corporate success, client outcomes if you're dealing in the addiction world, and employee satisfaction and productivity. So my little story to kick us off is a time that I did a terrible job with engagement. I had taken on a new position. I was a contractor, but working as a director in a behavioral health company. And I had been there for 2 weeks. And during that 2 weeks, I'd met with the executive team, I'd met with middle management, I'd done some assessments, I'd sort of tried to figure out what was going on. And I came up with this brilliant, I'm sure, idea about how to rearrange the entire program. And I pitched it to the executive team and I pitched it to the middle managers, and everyone said, great, sounds fabulous, let's do this. So 3 weeks into my tenure, I sat down with all the clinical staff, none of whom I'd really met at all. I said, hello, my name is Ilana, nice to meet you. Here's what we're gonna do to change everything about how you're operating. And as you can imagine, that didn't end up really sticking or going over well with some of them for good reason. And I really wish that I had known the information that I'm about to share with you before going down that pathway. I definitely overemphasized my ability to be persuasive in thinking about how I could potentially lead this big shift, this big change. There was no engagement. The employees didn't know who I was. They didn't know about the process. They didn't know about the changes coming up. They weren't consulted. And lo and behold, it didn't work. So why engagement? Because if we want the things that we are hoping to accomplish at the workplace to work, we depend on the people around us to implement them and to get active and to give us ideas. And without engagement, those things typically don't happen, or at least don't happen as well as they could. So for today, here's our agenda for the day. Number one, we're going to go over fairly briefly a big picture process. This is real relevant if you are an executive or a senior leader and you're looking at, well, how do I tackle employee engagement from an organizational level? We're going to go over that pretty briefly. The bulk of our time is going to be spent on the top 3 engagement mistakes that many of us, myself included, as I just shared, make when we are looking to coalesce and engage a team, get people really motivated and mobilized and functioning the way that we hope that they will. And number 3, and this is the most important part, and we'll spend a lot of time on this, is we're going to go over strategies for effective engagement across roles. But I encourage you guys to think about, I'm sure some of you identify as leaders in the traditional sense. You have a bunch of direct reports. That's great. Some of you may not, identify in that way. So what I will share with you is the strategies we're going to go over today. They can be implemented whether you have direct reports or not. It's really a way of engaging those around you. Certainly, if you have the luxury of having at your disposal a budget or things like that, it can be some of these things can feel a little bit easier. But this is really relevant material no matter where you fall in sort of the organizational hierarchy. So outside of just the bare bones agenda, the outcomes you will gain. What do we actually hope that you're going to get out of this talk today, myself and C4? One is a process to guide organizational level engagement initiatives. Spoke about that a minute ago. 2 is a framework to develop your engagement approach. And number 3, this is a big take home, is a personalized engagement strategy. What's really important to emphasize at the start of this webinar is there is no one size fits all, like just do X, Y, and Z. And then you will have experienced amazing employee engagement and have folks that are really motivated and mobilized and getting active the way that you hope that they will. That just doesn't exist. So I'm not going to spout for you any sort of theory or anything like that today. What we're going to go over is a step-by-step systemic approach that will help you ask yourself the right types of questions so that you can develop a strategy that works for you and every team member that you're kind of thinking of as we go through this. I will be sharing some slides that have some pretty detailed information, little charts and things that you can do for yourself. So you may want to have a pen and pencil. Pen and pencil. Who uses pencils? Pen and paper. Okay, so getting into it. So big picture, we'll go over this fairly quickly. This is for organizational level initiatives. Number one, if you're a senior leader and you're thinking, gosh, I know I could get more productivity and more satisfaction and just a better level of mobilization within my workforce as a whole, the first thing you really want to do if you're going to take this seriously is you want to do an assessment. There's some really great tools out there, some great companies that offer assessments at that level, sort of organizational wide engagement assessments. There's an SHRM website. I can send you the link if you're interested after this webinar. There's a vendor directory there. The point of an assessment, though, is you really want to get a good sense of, okay, where are we currently? Before I start putting money and resources and time into fixing a problem, what is our current state? Once you've got that first assessment, you want to work with your other senior leaders and get aligned. And there's some basic questions that you can ask of yourself and the rest of your team that can provide that big picture sort of foundational alignment. Number one, when it comes to employee engagement, what's working? What do we know we're doing right now that is effective, that our people like, that we're getting good reviews on, that is generating the results we want to see? Number two, what isn't working? What do we know are sort of our blind spots, our weaknesses? Do we have some managers that, everyone that works for them says it's a terrible experience? What's not working? Number three, what solutions have we tried before that haven't worked? And this is an important part of aligning because we as humans have sometimes a tendency to just keep trying the same thing again and again and again. I know many of you work in the addiction field, so you know what this is like, but even at the workplace, we have a tendency of doing that, of trying things when we know, gosh, we've tried that before and it hasn't worked. I'm going to deploy my same HR professional to deliver the same message. And last time, no one really bought into it, but I'm going to try again because maybe they need to hear it a second or a third or an eighth time. So what have we tried that has not worked? And then this is probably the most important one. What are our current ideas for improvement? Just start off with that open brainstorm. What are our ideas on what we could do that would improve engagement? Next, we want to develop a systemic approach. And what I mean by this is it's very easy when we're looking at something big and vast like engagement to say, okay, well, we have all of these ideas and let's just go out and let's start valuing people more and let's have our managers, get more active with soliciting feedback from their employees and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. What we need before, if we're going to take this kind of an initiative seriously, we need a systemic approach. So my suggestion here is strategic planning. A good strategic plan goes over what is the current state, what is our desired state, and what are the key priorities that we're going to look to help us get there. Once we figure out what those key priorities are, we develop an actual action plan. So again, it's something that is systemic. It's something that's thought out. It's not just sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing if you start getting better survey results from your employees. And number four, and this is really important, is ongoing evaluation. So you want to be setting within that systemic approach. You want to be thinking about what are the KPIs, key performance indicators, what are some milestones that we're hoping to hit, external and internal indicators. And throughout this, what I would say is the single biggest question, if you are looking at this in this perspective, the biggest question you need to ask yourself and the rest of your senior leadership team is, are we really ready to prioritize this and to take it seriously? Are we really ready to put in the time, the resources, the money, all of that to take something like this seriously? Or is this just lip service? Are we going to make a big to-do and tell everyone that we're focused on engagement and then not do it, which can oftentimes have really negative effects. So real broad strokes, that is a big picture process if you're looking at this from an organizational perspective. I'm just going to toss this quote up here. I've just found 10,000 people. So whether you're looking at it from that big picture organizational level, or certainly the work we're about to do together, which is more of the personal engagement strategies, I really encourage you to think about this quote and just give yourself permission to recognize, as I did first on this call, when we've done things that don't work, we're not failing, we're just learning, sometimes the hard way, right? So diving in, mistakes and solutions. So just like we did in the big picture sort of organizational level, we're going to go into some of the most common mistakes that we do as individuals. Number one, and this one is by far and above, it happens all the time, the folks that I work with as an executive coach, teams that I work with at the organizational level, they say to me, well, I really need to figure out how to engage or motivate or inspire or whatever them. We try to engage an amorphous them. I just had an executive coaching session this morning with a VP I'm working with, and she said this exact almost quote to me. She said, you know, I've got all these unit managers and different folks, and I really need to figure out how to get them more motivated. I need to figure out how to help them feel valued. Well, here's the problem with that. We can't engage, we can't help connect with and meaningfully motivate and inspire an amorphous they, because every individual within that group is going to have really different characteristics, some different motivations, some different attributes, different career goals, all of this that are going to impact how effective any given intervention is on engaging or really bringing them in to whatever it is you're trying to. Do not engage at them. You have to get that in your mind. When you think about your team, don't think about it as a department or sort of single entity. Think about it as every single individual. So step one, and again, now we're going to start to get into some strategies. These are process-oriented strategies, so you don't necessarily need to write things out the way I'm going to suggest, although many find it very useful. So step one, we know we can't engage with them. We need to look at every individual. So how do we do that? Well, here's one suggestion. List each team member, and I've given you just a simple grid of how you could do that, their name. Again, if you're not a leader in the sense of having direct reports, list the people that are on your peers in your team that you're wanting to get on board with an idea you have or get acting in a certain way. Going across from left to right, R factor. I encourage you to just number these on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 meaning not at all, 10 meaning a lot or excellent. What is your current relationship with that person? So if you've got someone on your team, a direct report or otherwise, who you just know that they drive you nuts and you heard them talking bad about you at the water cooler and you know that you're not their favorite person either, you'd have a pretty low R factor. The relationship is not very healthy, right? It's not very fulfilling. It's not doing that well. On the other hand, if it's someone that you feel really close with, you look forward to seeing them, you know they do too, you enjoy spending lunch together, that the R factor would probably be pretty high. So scale of 1 to 10, relationship. Number 2, the P factor. That is their current performance. So right now, this person, they're not the best person on my staff, but they're definitely not the worst. They might be a 5. If they've really gone above and beyond, just blown you out of the water and you're really impressed, they'd be a 10, etc. Third column, G factor, that stands for growth potential. So when we think about our team, this is especially relevant if you're leading and trying to develop other leaders within the organization. We want to think about, without being overly sort of putting people in boxes, what is their growth potential? How far do they want to go in the organization? And from what we can see right now, do they have the potential to get there? 1 to 10. Number 4, V factor, how vital is this person to your current success or the success of the initiative or the team or the organization? How vital are they? How important are they? Sometimes we have someone who is got a great relationship with them. They're not really performing all that well. They've got a lot of growth potential, but they're not really that vital to this current initiative. So that will tell me something about how much time I want to spend potentially working with them on this initiative. There may be other areas that I can work with them in more effectively. And then the last column, E factor, that stands for energy. So how much energy are you currently giving this person? Same client that I just referenced, who I met with this morning for our executive coaching session. She did this worksheet between our last two sessions. So from last session to this one on this engagement issue with her team. And what she found, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is somewhat of a theme, is the folks that she has a really good relationship with, those are the ones that she spends more time with. That doesn't seem that unnormal based on human tendencies, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that because she has a good relationship with them and enjoys sitting with them for lunch and whatever, it doesn't mean that they're that vital. It doesn't mean that they're performing that well or that they have a lot of growth potential. So in part of our work together today, she was able to really see that in black and white from filling out this spreadsheet to go, wow, where I'm spending my time as a leader and a member of this team really matters. And right now I'm not necessarily spending my time strategically. I'm just spending it based on sort of my personal enjoyment factor, which is valid, but not to her report moving her where she wants to go with her team. So once we've sort of got this big picture layout of where are my folks, how are they performing, what's their growth, et cetera, we want to really get to know each team member. Now, this is not something that I would expect anyone to fill out. These are just some sort of thought prompts. But if you don't know the basic attributes of your team members, it's going to be really hard to figure out how to motivate them, how to inspire them, how to mobilize them and help them be as productive as they can be. So we want to know things like, what are their aspirations? What are they really interested in professionally? What drives them? What are their most valuable contributions from the past? What are personal factors that may be coming up? You know, if you've got a team member that's going through an active divorce or who knows what, there can be things that are really affecting them that if you take a moment to be aware of, it can help you better manage or lead or just collaborate with them. What's their communication style? How do they like to communicate? Are they very direct? Do they prefer face-to-face? Do they like email? Do they like a lot of detail or just big picture? How do they like to communicate? What is their learning style? So I don't have to belabor this point, but people learn in a really different way. So for some people, if I just think that I can say something and it'll stick, that's going to be very ineffective. Whereas for others, I can hand them handouts all day long. They're going straight in the trash, right? So how do they like to learn? What are their values? This is as a person and of course as a member of your team. What is their preferred rewards and recognition? We're going to go over that in more detail a little later. What are some professional development opportunities that you see for them and that they see for themselves? Supporting people in their own professional growth is typically a great way to engage and mobilize them when they really see that you're invested in them. But you have to know, well, what are they interested in? What are the things that they would like, or else your support is not helpful. And then at the end of all this, what are some of the implications for engagement? So once you've thought about where are each of my people, sort of in the grand scheme of the team or the initiative, and then with each and every person sort of getting to know them more individually, then you're ready to start to create a strategy for each team member. So this is a very simplified spreadsheet. I wouldn't expect, again, for you to necessarily fill it out, but you want to think about each person, what is your strategy and when are you going to do it? So some idea joggers listed here for you. For some folks, an incentive might be really helpful. Again, just because it's fresh in my mind, this individual who I just did this with this morning, she realized that the single person on her team that she was having the hardest time with in terms of engagement and performance was also the person she was spending the least time with. So that was one insight. The second insight was she knows this person has really coveted spending more time with her family and has been putting in a lot of extra hours because they've been short-staffed. So in part of her process, she went, gosh, they've been short-staffed. I've said thank you to her, but I'd love to really incentivize and reward in a different way. I'm going to give her a paid day off. She can just stay home with her family, do whatever she wants, and I'm going to pay for that day because I know that's valuable to her. She also said in that same sentence, I'm not going to give her a bonus or a raise or anything like that because this employee has literally come to her before and said, I don't want more money because it messes with my family's tax bracket. They're kind of right at that, you know, right at a line between something and something else. So that person did not want more money. We think to ourselves oftentimes, oh, if I want to, you know, reward or whatever, the way to do it is cash or a bonus or a raise or something. That's not always true, as that case proves. So we can figure out how to incentivize mentoring or moving the person up, both us mentoring them, but also sometimes some of the best engagement strategies are, can that person mentor someone else? can we give that person an opportunity to lead or to be more on the forefront or to coach? That can be a very, very motivating attribute of someone's career, help them grow professionally, help the team feel more bonded. So do we need to spend more time with them? Can we help them spend more time with other people? Do they need more training? That's a real obvious one, but sometimes it's just people just need to know more in order to be able to do their jobs effectively. Sometimes they need to be redeployed. So you may have an employee or a teammate who's just not in the right seat on the bus or not overseeing the right types of initiatives. Once we get to really know the person, that can help figure out, are they really in a place where we're maximizing their talents, or should we redeploy them, you know, maybe to another area, another project, etc. Direct and inspect. This is kind of a nice way to say micromanage. So sometimes when you've got a performance issue that is persistent, and you've tried different, or you know, maybe this is the first strategy for some people, but you really do just need to say, hey, listen, here's what I need to see from you, X, Y, Z, and here's what I'm going to check back in with you. And then you check back in and you make sure that that person is being accountable, following through. That type of direct sort of high focus accountability can actually be very helpful. Typically what we see is that either people are going to get better or they're going to move on. So sometimes you need to just be very directive and keep a focus on what they're up to. Managing expectations. Sometimes folks might be disengaged, meaning they're not motivated, they're not, you know, being as productive as they could be because we haven't done a good job at managing their expectations. So someone signs on with the facility and they're told, oh, you know, you're going to work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And then right before they get hired, right before they actually onboard, someone else quits. And you know what, we really need someone nights and weekends. And so we come to them and we say, we're sorry, we know this wasn't what we said at first. We really need you nights and weekends. It's just going to be a few weeks until we hire someone. And they say, okay, it's a new job. Sure, I'll be, you know, low woman on the totem pole. And they go into the nights and weekends. And then it's just taking us a long time to hire. And it's been a month and it's been 2 months. And well, they seem like they're doing fine. So, you know, we're just going to kind of leave that as is. And 3 months later, we get this report that they're irate because we had told them it was going to be a few weeks and it's been a few months, and the long-winded explanation. But we really have to manage expectations. We have to keep, if there is a limit that we need to set, if there is something we can or can't deliver on, we have to let people know that. And sometimes just letting people know what is the honest expectation and what's, you know, going to be required of them, what is or isn't going to be available to them, that can go a long way to engaging and mobilizing them. Sometimes we can expand duties. So kind of similar to mentoring or moving up, what we talked about in there, it can be thrilling and rewarding for someone to actually get more responsibility. We don't think about it that way, but some folks are definitely wired that way. And then sometimes it is necessary to remove. If someone is just not able to perform, not able to deliver the type of quality that we need for our team, for our clients, sometimes we do have to remove. So one thing to remember here, this is a quote that I just hold kind of dear as a leader, is you get what you tolerate. And I have not always done a good job at that. What I mean is if we allow for someone to continue to perform or act or have an attitude or a behavior in some way, if we just sort of let it keep going, we don't address it, we don't hold them accountable for it, there's no consequences, then that's going to continue. We're going to get what we tolerate. And I have made that mistake many times. I, like many people, want to be liked and can fall into lack of direct communication because of that. And you know, I've suffered that one the hard way. If you tolerate something to continue, it will continue. So when it comes to engagement, part of it is about mobilizing and helping people perform as best as they can. And part of it is about weeding out and not tolerating or allowing to continue those behaviors or patterns that really aren't serving the team or the organization, or at the end of the day, if you're calling in from a behavioral health center, the clients, which is the point of what we do. So that's section one. Section two, the second most common mistake that I see a lot, and that I've done it myself, and you probably have too, if you're honest. Number two is we don't customize our message. So my story at the beginning is a good example of this. I just sort of came in and said, hello, everyone, nice to meet you. Here's a whole change. Another story, one of the folks I'm currently coaching is a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. And he is an engineer through and through. Every way that he thinks is that sort of engineer brain. It's all processes and data and analyses and, you know, sort of step-by-step stuff. And so when we started working together, this gentleman, he thinks like an operating system. He's sort of, the world is broken down like a computer in his mind. So he had an issue with engaging his team and people not knowing what he was working on, not knowing how to communicate with him. He wasn't being effective in engagement with his team. So what he had done to try to fix that is he had created what he called, we'll call him John. He had created a John 2.0 operating system manual. And it was literally like it was a manual that he had written out. And it was, this is who I am. This is how I communicate. This is what ticks me off. This is how you should communicate with me. This is what I expect of you in this scenario, in that scenario, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And for some people, having that kind of a manual is super effective. For this guy, the CTO, having a manual of how someone likes to interact and be in relationship and communicate, and really helpful for him, right? But you can imagine if you're not someone that thinks that way, and as it turned out, most of his team, they were not people that thought that way. He was not working with other engineering type brains. That kind of manual, emailing you this PDF that is like, here's how to interact with me, was really ineffective. But he was sort of leaning back on that and saying, well, I sent you the operating system, so we should be good. And so a lot of our work was about, well, how do you personalize? So he had not figured out how to customize his message, as I have not figured out in many cases, and I'm sure still do. So what do we do about that? Number one, first strategy. We need to figure out how to develop and send engaging messages. I feel like I'm abusing that word today, but we need to figure out how to do that. So what are some common tendencies of an engaging message? Here's some basic tips. Looking at when you're communicating to folks, telling them, bringing them into the background. Where have we been? Where, let's say you're at a program with your company, you want to open up a new service line. New program, maybe serving a different population, or if you're working in more of a product-oriented company, maybe you are developing a new app or something. Well, where have we been? What's gone on before that's informing this decision, this desire, this change, this initiative? Where are we going? What is it that we're trying to do? Why does it matter? This is extraordinarily important. Most people can get on board, they can get engaged if they really understand why. But it's time consuming and can be a little tough to explain it. But why does it matter? Why do you matter? That's super important. I want to full stop there for a minute. Yes, this all matters for the organization or for the team or for the clients. Why do you matter? Person who is going to be relied on to implement this thing, or, I'm speaking a little bit broadly because this happens over a lot of different experiences, but why do they matter? What is the big picture strategy? So making sure that people know this isn't just a one-off, or this isn't something that hasn't been well thought out. How does this fit into the big picture? How does this strategy align with our values? So again, drawing it back into that shared sense of identity, that, really acknowledging that these are people at the heart of your team or organization. How does it align with the values? And then how does your role fit in with the big picture? So sort of toggling back to that, why do you matter? And then how does your role fit in? What are you going to do that's going to be really important to making this all work? So once we've got a hopefully engaging message developed, we want to focus on setting clear expectations. So again, there's a lot of examples of this, but we really want people to understand what is it that we're going to be asking of them. So here's what that looks like. Here's some examples of what you're doing right now that I like or appreciate, team member X. Here's what you're doing that I don't like. Some leaders struggle with the first bullet point there, and some leaders struggle more with the second. So some leaders have a harder time just giving out compliments and saying, hey, I just want to take a pause and let you know this thing that you do or this way that you are, I really appreciate that. It's really working for our team. Others have a harder time leaning into the conflict and the potential discomfort and saying, hey, listen, you're great over here, but these things that are going on, they're really not working. I don't like it. It's not working. Here's why. So here's what I like. Here's what I don't. Here's what I expect from you. And be clear. Put things in behavioral terms that people aren't going, well, gosh, I have no idea what I'm actually expected to do, right? Be really clear. Be tangible. If you follow through, the benefits will be, I like that you know, are such a hard worker. What I don't like is that, you know, although you are a hard worker, you also have a real negative attitude sometimes. And, you know, I hear you complaining a lot in the hallways, and that can really bring down the morale of the other people. What I expect is that you'll keep working hard. I love that. It's hugely beneficial for our organization, for our clients. But I really do expect that if you have complaints, you'll bring them to me or to HR, or process them in a way that is appropriate and doesn't bring other people down. If you can follow through with that, if you're able to do that, I would love to talk with you about potentially moving forward towards a management position. I know that's something you're interested in. You know, I'd love to support you in that. Next bullet, if appropriate, and that's important, this is not always appropriate. If you don't, the consequences will be. So in that example, if you're not able to follow through on this, and if I keep getting reports of you just, you know, having all this negative interaction with staff as well as clients, which is really inappropriate, then I'm going to have to write you up. And as you know, that's sort of the first stage of a discipline process that, you know, can result in all sorts of things. And then finally, and this one's really important, what support do you need from me? So you're letting the person know, just as transparent as you can be, what you like, what you don't, what you expect to see from them. And then definitely ask them all throughout that process, really, what support do they need from you? Check in to make sure they're understanding it, right, throughout the time, and that they have an ability to give input too. So we've developed and sent an engaging message. We're setting clear expectations. Next, this one's one that a lot of people like. We want to make sure that we're taking time to reward and recognize, right? There's nothing arguably better in terms of mobilizing and making people feel excited and motivated than, well, how do we reward and recognize them? So here's sort of some basic things to think about when you're considering for each individual employee, again, because we're not with a them, it's with a you, a one person, what type of reward and recognition is going to be the most effective for them. So little chart here. Some people really prefer a private acknowledgement, and others really prefer a public acknowledgement. Some people prefer cash or awards. The example that I gave this morning, where she's going to give her a paid day off, that's kind of more of a cash or an award. And others prefer more words, time, symbolic gestures. So being MVP of the quarter, or a handwritten thank you note, something that just shows that they've been seen and valued and acknowledged. We can get into trouble, and I have gotten into trouble before, when we don't sort of think about how do people like to be rewarded and recognized. My client from this morning, for example, if she had just gone and handed this woman a big bonus check, the woman would have been like, shoot, now I'm in a higher tax bracket. I didn't want that check, you know? So we have to kind of think about that. An example is coming to my mind of myself, where really wanted to acknowledge and honor a whole department for doing a great job. And so gave them each an on-the-spot cash bonus. They each got a check, just on the spot, happened all in one day. They all got it. And at the time I was like, okay, good. You all have been acknowledged now. But that was such a short-sighted strategy. It really wasn't a strategy. It was a short-sighted decision, because that was a department of 35 people. And so, you know, for some people that might have felt actually, you know, like they weren't being seen, because it's like, oh, you're just going to pay us all off for how hard we've been working. I don't know. I'm just giving myself feedback here, but it's really helpful to think about, how does each individual want to be rewarded and recognized? And that relates back to, in our very first section, really getting to know each of your team members and understanding them. And, you know, some folks, if you give them public praise and in a meeting, they're going to flush bright red and not be able to hear you because they're so flustered and don't know what to do with it, right? Others, if you just tell them one-on-one, they're going to think, well, gosh, no one even knows that except you and me. So no one can really, you know, I don't feel like I'm getting the accolades I deserve. So figuring out how to reward and recognize. Last step on customizing our message is adapting our communication to the individual. And really that's sort of the summary of all of the previous steps. So a little graph that you could use for yourself, if that was helpful, is, listing folks by name, understanding their why. What is it that motivates them? Why are they in this job? Especially when we're working in behavioral health, where so many people would say, I'm here because it's the right thing to do. I'm here. This is a calling, not a job or a career. This is a calling. I want to give back. I want to see the light come on in an addict's eyes again, right? There's a lot of heart in this industry, if you are in that, if you are a member of the behavioral health industry right now. So understanding their why, that's going to really affect how we message things to them. Setting the appropriate expectations. So what expectations do you have of that person when if you've got a new initiative you're rolling out, or if it's just an existing team member and you really want to see them thrive or succeed or contribute, what do you expect of them? And making that tangible and behavioral and something that they can actually implement, not just, oh, I really want to see you give it your all. Well, what do you mean? I don't get that. All right, so making it very clear. What are the benefits and, if appropriate, the consequences? What type of recognition do you think and do you plan to give them, assuming that they continue to do a good job? Who else needs to be involved? So sometimes, you may not be the right person to deliver the message. You may not be the right person to implement different pieces of it. So who else is going to be helpful to be involved, and by when? So when are you going to do this? And you'll notice on pretty much everything that I have laid out for you guys, there's a when column. And the when is really important. We have to be, just like at the beginning when we talked about the organizational level, the biggest question is, are you really ready to commit to this? Same thing goes for us when we're working on helping our individual team members perform at their best and be as collaborative as possible and engaged as possible. We need to be able to hold ourselves accountable. So I always put that when on there, because it's very easy to go, well, I know I've been tolerating a certain type of behavior from Joey. Joey has been late to every meeting, and gosh, it happens sometimes with clients' families, and that's been really embarrassing to have to wait 10 minutes for Joey to get there. But he's a really nice guy, and he does all this other stuff really well. So well, that'll keep going. You'll continue to have that same performance if you don't, as a leader or a member of your team who is committed to having that sort of leadership influence, if you don't set yourself a timeline to a certain extent and really hold yourself accountable to getting active. So that was section 2 on messaging. Number 3, the third mistake, and this one's a little bit more insidious, but it oftentimes underpins a lot of what goes wrong in number 1 and 2. Number 3 is sometimes we just haven't earned the right to lead. So thinking back to my story at the beginning, I had never met most of those people. I had never worked alongside them. They didn't know who I was. And I walked in and said, hello, here's a change to your whole world. I really had not earned the right to lead in that moment, right? There are times that we do things like that. That was not well thought out. So little self-assessment here. I encourage you, if you have the ability to pull out your phone with a notepad or just a piece of paper, I'd like you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being never and 10 being always. And this is meant for exploration, so just do your best to the following sentences. People at work, number 1, do what I ask them to do. If that happens 10 out of 10 times, give yourself a 10. If that happens not that often, maybe a 2 or 3, 4, something like that. People at work do what I ask them to do. Number 2, people at work show up on time for meetings with me. Really think about it. Are the folks that you interact with, are they typically on time? Are you constantly waiting on people? If they are running late, are they texting you or calling you or emailing to let you know? Number 3, people at work ask for and value my opinion. So do people come to you proactively and say, hey, what do you think about this? And when you speak, do they listen, right? Number 4, oh, well, there we go. I jumped ahead of myself. Number 4, do people at work listen attentively while I speak? So really think about this. When you're in a room full of people and you open your mouth, is there a lot of shuffling? Are people talking over you? Do you have a hard time getting a word in edgewise? Or are you able to really, command the space? And do people stop what they're doing, give you their eyes, and focus on what it is that you're saying? Number 5, people at work go above and beyond to meet or exceed my expectations. So in general, do you find that people will sometimes even surprise you? You'll say, hey, I'd love, your help on X, and they come back, you've asked them for a paragraph and they give you, an entire, plan, right? Are people really trying to exceed your expectations? Are they focused on sort of making you proud, making you happy, making you feel good about the work that they're doing. Number 6, do people at work bring me new ideas for consideration? So, people, again, the whole point, the reason we're doing this webinar is people are at the heart of every single business, no matter the industry, no matter the size. It's people that make business work and make organizations work. And oftentimes innovation comes from the existing workforce, right? So are people bringing you new ideas for consideration? Number 7, people at work ask me to mentor them. Have you been asked to be a mentor? And if so, is that a pattern for you, or did it happen kind of a one-off? Do people come to you and say, hey, I'd love to get some of what you got. I'd love for you to, spend some time with me and help me, improve and succeed and learn some things that you can teach. And number 8, last one, do you believe, and just try to be honest with yourself here, that people would recommend you as a great person to work for or with? Would people at work recommend you as a great person to work for or with? So you can type in the Q&A box if you'd like to share any of your insights from this, anything that you're gaining. These questions are broad, but they are meant to get you thinking about, through asking you to conceptualize it from the lens of others that work with you, thinking about how you are currently perceived as a leader. If you haven't earned the right to lead, and again, I don't mean leader in terms of hierarchy within the organization. There are leaders who are frontline staff or entry-level people that are still leaders within that sphere, right? There's still people that will be asked for their opinion and they will be valued by their peers. There's still people who others show up on time for meetings with them, and when they go to speak, others are listening to them attentively because they have that presence, right? There are others who just don't have that. I have an example from a large-scale international manufacturing company who a new CEO had taken over. The old CEO had been very dictatorial, very my way or the highway, no matter what, didn't give anyone space to, have ideas or do anything. And they were losing a lot of money on one of their products. And the new leader came in and he had really established this culture of engagement. And he had really established this belief that everyone's opinion mattered. Everyone had something to contribute that was worthwhile. And he had created systems, and his team, I should say, had created systems within this international organization where there was a direct line of feedback from any level of the organization up through their management, so that literally at the end of the day, pretty much everyone was able to get a message straight to him. And because that helped people feel engaged, because that helped people feel empowered and motivated, he ended up receiving a piece of advice from a frontline staff at one of his factories about how they could redo the way that they painted. They were selling aluminum siding for a building. And one of the frontline staff who'd been immediately involved in it, had worked there for 10 years, saw this going on, had a recommendation for how they could redo their painting process. And they ended up, it had been this sort of money suck on the organization. They were losing a lot of money because they had all this inventory they couldn't sell. This guy came up with a way to repaint it, and they ended up not having to have all that inventory laying around anymore. Saved the company, hundreds of millions of dollars. This is a big international company. So, and that all came from, if you sort of, unpack it, that all came from developing a culture of engagement and helping folks feel ready to show up. But that couldn't have happened if that leader had not yet earned the right to lead. So when we're thinking about engaging others, when we're thinking about our communication strategy, we have to first look at ourselves. So what is the strategy? How do we earn the right to lead? This is not an exhaustive list. There is so much more out there about how we can earn the right to lead. But number one, and this is the most important one, I believe, is leader goes first. Leader goes first. We have to go first. If I want people on my team or in my organization to treat others with respect, but I'm walking around and throwing cuss words at people, calling them names, yelling at them, whatever, then that's an incongruent message and it's not going to work, right? If I want people to be engaged in such a way that they share ideas and they innovate and they're willing to come up with new tendencies or new techniques to break the status quo, but whenever someone does that, I shame them or I yell at them or something like that. Leader has to go first. I have to personally model what I want to see in others, or it's not going to happen. Modeling the values of the organization. So I think we've all been in places and maybe have experienced it ourselves as individuals where, you know, the person hasn't earned the right to lead because they're just so clearly going against the values of the organization. They don't represent it. Number 3 is performance. You know, if you want to earn the right to lead, you've got to be able to, you know, put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. You've got to be able to perform. I don't want to learn, if I'm a surgeon, and I'm a student learning how to be a surgeon, and there's one doctor who has huge success rates with all of her surgeries, and there's another doctor that keeps like accidentally cutting off people's arms because he slips in the OR or something like that. I don't want to learn from someone that can't perform well, right? We have to know that the things that we are trying to lead people to do, that we're able to perform ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm an expert in everything that you do, right? That doesn't mean that, but we need to have a basic level of high performance ourselves as an individual to earn the right to lead others. Credibility. So we have to be consistent. We have to be credible, kind of relates to performance. Communication. Our communication style is key. How we talk to people, how we show up. Body language is big on this. I have a client I'm working with right now who, she has the best of intentions. She's a VP as well. She has the best of intentions, and she's very quality driven, and she wants to see great things from her facility. She leads a healthcare facility, and she wants to see great things from it, but she has this way of knitting her brow and like going like this. And we actually eventually just recorded her. I just recorded her talking to me and then played it back to her without any sound so she could see her nonverbals are all over the place in her way, because she's just very intense. She's taking it very seriously. But if I'm like this at you, it's hard not to feel like you're being attacked or something, right? So communication is huge. I mentioned this one before, but you get what you tolerate. I, again, have learned this one the hard way of letting someone slide on something because, oh, they're so effective in another area, or there's these reasons why it would be difficult to approach them about it or whatever. And if you tolerate it, it will continue. Period. Full stop. End of story. My husband is a relatively new manager. He works for an international technology company, and he's going through this right now, where it's just really, it can be really hard to go to your people and say, hey, here's what you are doing that is just not meeting our expectations. But if you don't have those conversations and put in place some real, consequences of some sort, then people can't even know what they're supposed to be doing better. And they're certainly not going to change it if it's just being allowed to continue, right? You get what you tolerate. What you reward, so pay really close attention to what you reward. Reward things that are in line with the organization's values and with your overall goals as a leader or a member of a team, with where you want that initiative or that team to go. Other ways to earn the right to lead, really looking at our own work ethic. So if I'm asking folks to put in what I know is going to be 80 hours worth of work, and I'm, on the golf course all day long or something, that's not going to probably play off all that well. Listening. That's a big part of communication. I didn't probably talk about that enough, but when someone has something to share with you, be it a professional idea, a personal update, really taking the time, put your damn phone down, put it away. Don't text while someone's talking to you. Don't email while they're talking to you. If you don't have time to really listen to someone, then say, I would like to hear what you have to say. This isn't a good time. Could you come back in 10 minutes, or can we schedule something for next week, or whatever? But really listening. And when you listen, saying, oh, what I hear, it's so cheesy. We ask our clients to do it, but it really does work. What I hear you saying is this, or am I understanding you right, that blah, sort of clinical skills, but use them at work as well. Next, where you spend your time. Yeah, so just like my client earlier, she was spending all of her time with people she had good relationships with, not necessarily the people that were the most vital to the initiative or that were performing the best, or certainly that had the most growth potential. So she's just spending time with people that she liked, which doesn't send a strong message as a leader at all, right? How you react to stress. This is big, and it relates to the bottom one, which is EQ, which we'll go over in a minute. But how you react to stress is a big deal. That is going to impact how people see you. If you're sort of this cool cucumber, but then the minute that, I don't know, a client has a bad outcome or something is missed in your billing department or whatever the case may be in your organization, you blow off the handle. Well, that creates a lot of instability that does not earn you the right to lead. Mutual respect, that one's obvious. Give it if you want to get it. Being positive and professional. So kind of understanding what different situations call for, being generally speaking positive and goal-oriented, solution-focused. There's, you know, it's fabulous when people are willing to be brave and say, hey, here's what's not working about this organization. Here's what's not working about you as a leader. I've got 2 people in my life that I will be forever grateful to. They were direct reports of mine, and they were brave enough to tell me, hey, you're doing this thing and it's not working. You know, it's having a negative impact on me and on the rest of the team. And I kind of tussled with that for 24 hours and was like, oh, I hate this feeling. I feel so vulnerable and so exposed. And then it really changed how I lead and how I communicate and, you know, how I show up. So at any rate, being positive, being professional, being dependable. So do what you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. And then this last one, and I made this bold as well, because it does underpin most of the other sections, is EQ, which stands for emotional intelligence or emotional intelligence quotient, kind of like IQ, but EQ, which you've probably heard about. It's gotten very popular in the last years, and there's tons of courses and training opportunities and things. I offer EQ-oriented work if anyone's interested in that. But what we oftentimes find is at the end of the day, underneath the poor communication patterns or not showing up in a professional manner or not listening very well or not reacting to stress in a way that is effective or you know, shows a strong leadership skills, at the end of the day, under a lot of that is this EQ stuff. And really briefly, what I would say about emotional intelligence, think about it almost in quadrants. There's self and other. And there is the necessity to be aware of what's going on with yourself, tuned in, aware of what's going on with others, empathetic, and then have some level of control. And I don't mean you're a robot, but I mean, I'm aware of what's going on with me. I've got a good idea. I'm kind of trying to think about or intuit what's going on with you. Now I'm going to choose my next behavior mindfully. I'm going to choose how I show up. I'm going to choose, you know, how I treat you, how I communicate, that sort of thing. So self-control or self-action, and then self-regulation is maybe a better word for it. And then same thing on the opposite side. What are you doing on an organizational level or a team level to try to show up in a meaningful way? So those are all things to look at when we're trying to figure out, have I really earned the right to lead? At the end of this, always, this work should be about action. So ask yourself, what are some insights that you are learning through this process that how could you better earn the right to lead? Maybe as we were going over this talk, you thought about, gosh, I'm asking people to do things that I would never be willing to do. My work ethic or my performance or my credibility is really in question. Or gosh, maybe it's just really my reactions to stress. When things stress me out, I blow up, and that's probably hindering my right to lead, right? What are your insights? And then, as always, ending with an actual strategy. So in this engagement strategy, the way that I'm recommending for you, and you know, take what fits and leave the rest, what is your top engagement priority? That could be an individual person. That could be an initiative that you're hoping to oversee. What is the top priority for you right now as a leader and a member of your team in terms of engagement? What would be the most beneficial? If you could get people engaged or get this person engaged, what's the top priority? What will you do? Who else will be involved? How will you hold yourself accountable? And then, of course, as always, by when. So this is, I don't expect this to be done in an Excel spreadsheet, but this is how one can think about sort of an overarching strategy for improving engagement. This is my name, Ilana. I am, again, the CEO of Work. My email and my phone number. If you have any questions whatsoever, anything you would like to follow up with me on, or would like resources on, you know, if you're interested in figuring out, well, gosh, this is all great, but it was a lot of information, please do be in touch with me. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to share this with you today. And I do want to remind you guys, we're going to close here in just a moment. I don't actually see any questions in the Q&A. So we're going to close here in a moment, but I do want to remind you to please stay on board for a few minutes afterwards. You're going to receive a short poll from C4 that'll really help us improve. So thank you so much for your time, and we will sign off. Thanks, everyone.